Hi. Today's topic is writing the book Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived. And we have Radhika and Jorden here. Hello.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good. Let's begin with an introduction.
Sure. Do you want me to get started?
Sure. Let's do it.
So I'm Radhika Iyengar. I am originally from India. I grew up in North Africa, in Morocco, and then came to the U.S. On a full scholarship. And let's say the rest is history. I wound up in Southern California and got my MBA and came up to Silicon Valley, and definitely the rest is history after that. But yeah, by way of introduction, serial entrepreneur, and have been in blockchain for the last, 2.5 years plus. I'm a digital health expert, TEDx speaker, Silicon Valley woman of influence. Have done a lot of interesting things in my path to get here, and with blockchain and the focus in healthcare, that's a real convergence point for me. Very heavily involved in that area, and then just proud to have co-authored this great book with my colleague and partner Jorden, and we have some great news we can report after his.
Yeah, great, Radhika. Thanks for having us, Michelle. And my name is Jorden Woods, and I've been a serial entrepreneur, investor, originally Caltech-trained astrophysicist, and have done probably about 5 different companies here in Silicon Valley, reached to the mid-90s. And so very much focused on technology. I've raised about $48 million for my own companies, and have helped other companies raise about $150 million towards their fundraising efforts as entrepreneurs. Always have been at the cutting edge of technology. One of the first into decentralized systems back in the early 2000s. Very familiar with AI and enterprise blockchain, starting in 2017. Started, I guess, in 2016, but I came in 2017. Radhika and I have been collaborating about 7 years in, working together with advisory services, working with governments, working with accelerators, working with the entrepreneurial and the investor communities, with the universities, Stanford, Berkeley, et cetera.
And globally.
Yeah, and globally, very global in everything.
Uh-huh.
And, this last 18 months, and Radhika will go into that more, has been really exciting with our book.
Awesome. When did you first heard about blockchain? I mean, just a specific story, because that's always very interesting to me.
I think, Jorden, you should kick off on that front. About blockchain through you. But maybe you should get that kicked off.
Yeah. Well, everybody started out, I think, on the crypto side. Mm-hmm. So, as it turned out, my older son was getting into Bitcoin and asked for some Bitcoin for his birthday. Started asking in late 2016. Getting, and I kind of looked at it, and I'd heard about it obviously for a long time. Started looking at it, but it wasn't until I really saw Ethereum, and I hadn't really yet heard a lot about Bitcoin. A little bit late in the game in terms of getting to see Ethereum. It was early 2017, and that really switched on for me something that looked very familiar. Because I came into the entrepreneurial world in the dot-com period in the mid-90s, and I saw this world computer that they were talking about, and I thought, wow, lots of applications. And I started in the B2B phase of dot-com, and so it looked like enterprise blockchain to me.
I think what I'll add in terms of color to that, because Jorden started talking to me about blockchain, and like I said, mostly on the crypto side. But what I can say on the crypto side, initially, what I got really excited about is the whole global community feel to blockchain. As you know, my background is very global. I speak, 9 odd languages or so. And for me, that global community is really exciting. And that's really where I feel most at home. And I think that was one of the first things that impressed upon me was the incredible connectedness of the world through blockchain. The teams that we were seeing, that were doing ICOs and all this thing, they were all incredibly diverse, distributed across the globe, and I thought that was really exciting. It was very different, I thought, in profile to what we had always seen as far as companies. But then past that, when we looked at the technology, when I looked at the technology, for me, it was the...
So we started working with a number of healthcare companies and looking at healthcare applications first. With blockchain, that was like mid 2017.
Yeah.
And then we started looking in 2018 into supply chain and logistics. So we didn't really start in the fintech side. Actually in 2018, we went to Consensus in May in New York, and it was all fintech, right? And I was like, whoa, this was like massive world of, enterprise blockchain applications. And groups in the fintech space, which we didn't see so much in Silicon Valley. Obviously, we're not as, financially focused in terms of the sector with banking and those types of applications. But it was like, New York was like, well, is there anything else other than just banking and financial services? So we came in healthcare. And so in our book, we really focus on, the fintech sector, on banking, on supply chain and logistics and healthcare, but we started in the opposite order.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit of the partial blame in terms of bias in that area. Since a lot of my focus is in that sector, and there's just so much to be done in any of these areas. And I think what's really been exciting is to see the arc of development and enterprise leading the way in so many ways, transforming these sectors and industries into new ways of doing things and really expanding boundaries and mindsets along the way, as we know that that's really important, is not just stretching the boundaries of technology and the applications, but stretching the mindsets. And that's a very critical shift that I think has to happen if for true adoption to happen in the space in general.
Yeah, and something that we cover, Michelle, in the author's overview that we have in the book, it's a little bit about this genesis that we've talked through here. But, the next thing that happened was we just started getting into speaking. We spoke at Google to start and at Stanford. And
that was the debut.
Yeah, it was sort of the debut.
Yeah.
And, Chuck Easley, who actually has written a review for the book, was there at the very beginning. And
he's a professor at Stanford.
He's a professor at Stanford, and we, worked, he put together a panel for his class, and we had a great...
two classes, one at the graduate level and one at the undergrad level.
That's true. And so we had those, and then we did a podcast with him, and, that was great. And then we ended up just speaking pretty much everywhere. And we were just being sought after. We ended up doing about 100 different events.
Between the two of us.
I
would say about 100 conferences and events. Yeah.
Between 2018, like maybe March to early 2019, or like around now. And, the focus for us very quickly became enterprise blockchain. Everybody was talking about crypto, but we were all moving into, or the whole world was moving into crypto winter. And we were like, no, this is not the focus. The focus needs to be enterprise blockchain.
Well, to that point, at a number of the conferences that we ourselves co-produced with other organizations, we started using, at the time when it was still deep winter in crypto, we said, it's winter in crypto, but spring in enterprise. we just really saw the lift in terms of potential and adoption through enterprise, and very much brought back memories of early internet days and how that rolled out, and how enterprise put its muscle behind internet and got it to, really kick off in a very big way, and validated and authenticated and, underscored the value of the internet back in those days. And I thought, wow, this is really similar. So, Jorden, you wrote a prediction paper early on, predicting the unfolding of how the space would evolve.
Yeah, we actually wrote, starting in March of 2018, I came out with a piece about the disruptive nature of blockchain, how it was similar to .com, and then Radhika published in healthcare, and then I published something called Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived. That was the title of our book.
Well, it's interesting, this whole arc of how we've developed our thought leadership, and have published various articles leading up to the spot. They're almost like time-stamping our thought leadership and our perspectives in this space along the way. And then, of course, leading up to the beginning of this year, when we really, really hunkered down and we said, okay, this is a book. It's taken us a bit of time to get here, but here we are.
Yeah, that's super awesome. I wanted to ask you about the process of writing the book. How was that like to go to all these conferences, meeting entrepreneurs and different people, and then writing the book at the same time?
It was perfect, because, what happened, it really led to the fact that we have these 27 business leaders in our book along with ourselves, because like Michelle, the difference with the blockchain community is the ethos is about the community and the group, right? And it's about people and businesses and entities working together collectively towards a common goal. Or just, in an ecosystem where they're doing similar things and people are doing different aspects, but in a very decentralized way. So what we really saw with that is that, we need these other voices. We need people from the front lines. We need to show, and that even is with the image that we have on the front cover, where we have a team.
Well, I want to say a little bit about that. So first off, I think the setting for us was perfect, that, like Jorden mentioned, because all of this thought leadership that we did, these interactions that we kept having with various people in industry across the board, with entrepreneurs, like you were mentioning, and looking at the opportunities, the challenges, how this is all going to happen. And then what really struck me, continuing on into this diversity theme, was that there are so many important voices in the industry. And so for us, it was developing our thesis, our strategic insights, our comprehensive deep dive into this area. But then for what we wanted to develop through the book was a sense for the reader to get this front line. I'm sitting in the front row of an important conversation, and these are full-on conversations with these industry leaders, like Jorden mentioned. And one thing that I'm really, really proud of, and Michelle, I know you're going to love this, what we thought was as equitable a representation across not only gender, but also ethnicity and age. And I think we've got a very broad, rich, diverse spectrum of industry leaders that we've represented in our book. And to me, that's really representative of the beauty of what we're looking at in blockchain.
And in terms of enterprise blockchain, for our listeners out there who doesn't really understand what that term is, what does that mean?
Yeah, and we go through this, blockchain and crypto have been in the news for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And people in the crypto community often have misunderstandings about quote-unquote enterprise blockchain because it looks to them as a different kind of animal from, what we call permissionless systems. So what we talk about in the book, and we have a section on myths, is that really enterprise blockchain is very similar to the blockchain that everybody knows and loves in the community. Mm-hmm. However, it usually stems from a permissioned core. And what that means is that the groups that carry out consensus, which is really the crux of this, truth-making ledger, or this root or source of truth, is based on a group that is known, mm-hmm. and it's a set mm-hmm. of businesses. Businesses have very different needs from consumers. And we see this, here in Silicon Valley with, VCs. You have those VCs that invest into consumer kinds of companies, exactly. and those are focused on, mostly advertising and stuff like this, or advertising-based business models. And then on the other side, you have those B2B companies. And anybody that's been in the B2B world, there's a very strict adherence to privacy, to confidentiality of information. Yeah. And when you're looking at things like banking, this is not something where everybody wants to know necessarily what's in your bank account, right? You can carry out transactions, but, if you really take that to the nth degree, that's full transparency for every business about all of its operations, everything that it's doing. And it's not something that a business is going to sign up for. So an enterprise blockchain is typically these permission systems. At this point, and this is what we point out, these are kind of baby steps. Yes. But the enterprises, as we're seeing with Facebook, they validate the space. Everybody got so excited about Libra initially, or not, but the whole thing about it is that everybody knows the brands, and it's validating that this technology has something special about it. And it will open the door. We see that permission systems and permissionless systems will coexist. They will hybridize, where you'll have permission systems and permissionless systems that are going to interoperate. But the first step in terms of getting everybody behind this movement and on board, different from what people typically think, that it's going to be this, fully transparent, permissionless world. It's going to actually come through the permissioned world, which is going to give people trust in the technology, and then it's going to hybridize, and it's going to become a very exciting thing, which we talk about as Web 3.0. And there's multiple steps to it.
I think the step-by-step part, I completely agree with that. It's if we were to say that it's a step-by-step process towards this complete transformation, and as we know, these kinds of complete transformations take a long time. They're not these silver bullet, here we are and we've solved every problem. Technology is an evolution. So those of us that remember even the early days of the internet and how slow things were, there were hardware constraints, there were bandwidth constraints, and everybody had to live with that, but we didn't really think about that because we looked at the power of what could actually be achieved with instant communication. And that was indeed, communication was the whole point of TCP/IP. And so not unlike that arc, I think we're seeing a similar arc, maybe not identical, but certainly similar in many ways to the adoption in blockchain, where enterprise is coming in and saying there's a certain set of expectations and rules, like Jorden was pointing out, and these are considerations that are incredibly important in the enterprise. And they're helping to validate the space. They're helping to bring that enterprise muscle into this space, and giving the space and giving the technology the time that it needs to become more robust on many other levels, so that we can get to that next phase when it's going to be much more about permissionless systems, about consumer-facing systems. And this is really a whole progression into these systems development.
Yeah, and another thing a lot of people misunderstand, and that's why Libra was such a great example. Many of the early enterprise blockchain systems only were with enterprises. So it was, very much focused on one bank maybe doing a cross-border transfer with another. And that was just a pure business-to-business transaction. However, enterprise blockchain can also enable a consumer transaction through those same banks. Like it could even be a remittance, right? Somebody sending money back home to another country. Somebody making money in one country and sending it back to their parents in another. So the fundamental use cases that we go through are that Web 2.0, which is the world that we live in, has some fundamental flaws in its architecture, okay? And so, like Radhika talked about, it's a messaging system, and you can message basically anyone about anything. If you look at trust, if you look at identity, those are currently centralized systems based on a decentralized messaging network. That decentralized messaging network is the core and it works. The parts that are broken are the centralized parts, the centralized trust and the centralized identity. So what we need to do is we need to build a new layer of decentralized trust and decentralized identity. And this will complete what happened in Web 1 and Web 2. And now we will have a full decentralized stack. And the reason that we have fake news and we have so many, hacking, break-ins and counterfeiting and all of the problems that plague society with the internet infrastructure is because you have these single points of failure, which are the Web 2 centralized systems. Anyway, we could talk a lot about it. It's all in our book.
Yeah, so regarding the principles of decentralization, the ethos is really about being open, about community, and transparency, right? And then the businesses care about confidentiality. They care about privacy, not just consumer protection, but more of a bottom line, right? So how do you balance that as an enterprise?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, when you're dealing with these enterprise systems and they're largely permissioned today, or, even if you have a permissionless backing to that, you're going to behave in a more permissioned architecture or construct. The whole point of permissioned systems is that it's not this pseudonymous network. You know who the players are. They're fully vetted and authenticated and validated in order to be approved to be participating in this network, right? And so if you know who all the players are, when something goes wrong, which is what enterprises always care about, you need to be able to have the right governance mechanisms built in, the right consensus models to say, how do you deal with various scenarios that play out? What are the recourse methods that you have to take action in a variety of different scenarios? And enterprises need that degree of trust and privacy. And then the other part on privacy is enterprises are very sensitive about the data that they have, about people being able to forensically figure out what they're doing, how many units are going to be sold, how do they produce them, where are they sourcing these things from. All of this kind of information is very confidential and private information. The beauty of permissioned architectures is that you can retain that privacy and confidentiality. You can agree through consensus mechanism, through typically a consortium model, what is going to be shared, who, what each member is going to be shared, what are the different nodes on the network, what degree of control do they have. There's issues about ownership of data and that trust around that ownership of data. And when you really are making that agreed set upon data fully transparent, what does that mean, right? And so there's an opportunity really to behave across the ecosystem, and that's something that is very important as we go forward, because some of those issues in Web 2.0 structures just can't function because there's no transparency, there's no ability to share the things that you do absolutely need to share without breaching confidentiality or privacy. So I think in enterprise you have a great balance in being able to accomplish both. Obviously, the technical mechanisms by which you do things and what protocols you might follow to preserve privacy and confidentiality, those are more on the technical side, but the construct is definitely there that you can share and be transparent without transgressing the privacy and confidentiality that enterprises want to preserve.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Radhika is saying, if you look at making blockchain real for the business world, it has to do things a bit differently than the way it behaves in the consumer world. So we've already hit on a bunch of these things. But another very important thing is finality. Mm-hmm. One of the big issues you have in permissionless chains is the concept of forking of the chain. It's very common, and you get, issues with Ethereum, for example, which went through the DAO hack and fork there. And we have lots of forks of Bitcoin Cash, etc. So but also if you look at when a transaction takes place, it can take like an hour to settle. So if you can see yourself maybe at a Safeway, carrying out a transaction, if it took an hour for that transaction to finalize, you probably wouldn't want to use it because it's just not very practical. So what businesses are looking for is something that has finality, and that finality happens pretty fast, probably within the order of 10 seconds or less. So the really cool thing about permission systems is that they enable consensus protocols that have very rapid finality, nearly instantaneous, and they're highly performant, meaning that you can get thousands of transactions per second, versus if you look at a permissionless system, the common ones that we're used to are like 10 or 20 transactions per mm-hmm. second, which just is not enough, right? So not only with permission systems do you get the privacy and the confidentiality that you're looking for, but you also get this finality. You eliminate the potential for forks, because that's why you have finality, and you have a trusted network. These can also scale. They can scale much more than permissionless chains.
At
the moment. Now, we believe that there will be solutions with the permissionless chains which will make them much more scalable,
yes.
And there will be interoperability. The permission systems will dominate in the business world because of the reasons that we've talked about, but they will interconnect, and we will interact with them with dApps. And there's lots of examples. I mean, food traceability, mm-hmm, yeah. Food security is a big one. We don't yet have it here in the U.S., but it's actually pretty popular in Europe and in Asia. And we go through some of these cases where you go to the supermarket and you can scan,
yep.
Whatever it is. It could be a chicken, it could be, some vegetables, and you can see when it was picked. Yeah. You can see, if it's actually organic. You can see the certifications, for example, if it's organic, or if it's fair trade or whatever. And it's not just taking it on trust because it says it at the supermarket. It's actually blockchain-based, immutable record. And what they're finding is that this actually increases sales because it increases people's trust that they don't just have to say, oh, I saw a little sticker on that banana and it said it was fair trade. It's actually on the blockchain with a whole bunch of players that have indicated this is real.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the issue of trust, Jorden, because in our book, what we talk about is that we are in a phased adoption into this complete digital transformation towards Web 3.0, and we're in the phase of really the first phase, which is all about trust. There are other phases, which is about value and identity, and those are kind of coming along, not necessarily always in serial fashion. Some of it may overlap. It already is. But we do see that the stage we're in, the phase we're in, is really about the Internet of Trust. And so to that point, blockchain is definitely leading the way in terms of redefining what trust really means and authenticating trust. And so this is where we're at, and it's going to be decentralized. And so I think this is kind of where we're at. And what's exciting is that this is the first step of a long period of transformation heading towards Web 3.0, maybe not too long, I hope, but we are headed in that direction. And the use cases and applications and what we're seeing not only today with large-scale deployments even, but then the rollout in various sectors, because each sector has its own rate of adoption and its own curve to follow, that we're seeing a certain path to that adoption across many different sectors, and that's what we've captured in our book.
So on the issue of trust, do you think that blockchain makes businesses more trustworthy between each other and also with consumer?
No question.
No question.
When you have a group, what we actually talk about is when you have a bunch of distrusting groups and they can all agree on something, that is probably the highest level of trust that you can achieve, because you don't have collusion, they don't trust each other, and it's not one group telling you something and you should believe it because they say so. The more groups that are distrusting, that can agree on something, that proves to me, at least, that this is probably pretty trustworthy, because there's no incentive for them to agree otherwise, right?
So I guess let's look at the issues of trust and how it interplay with centralization / decentralization and governance, right? And what the governance is, whether it's open or close. So if the governance is open, and if it's centralized and one organization controls it and has authority over it, and it's decentralized, does it make it more trustworthy than something that is centralized, close governance with 100 nodes, for example?
That's a little complex because it comes down to consensus.
Yeah, it does.
And you see, if you look at proof of work, right, what's currently behind the consensus for Bitcoin, for Ethereum, there's incentivization there around hash power, right? The amount of hash power that you have. Those with more hash power because of the algorithm have a higher probability of getting a reward. And so this leads to pooling of resources. And these pools actually become more centralized entities. And so even though that there's a decentralized structure in these permissionless systems, they could potentially be more centralized than something with 100 nodes, where you don't have any collusion. So for example, if you have 3 pools that have more than 51% of the hash power, you really only have, technically speaking, 3 entities, even though you might have 20,000 nodes that are taking part in consensus. So you really have to look at what is the underlying incentivization behind the consensus algorithm. And so if you look at a system that's Byzantine fault tolerant and has 10 nodes, that can actually be more decentralized than every permissionless system that most people will use. Now, do we think that 10 is the number? No. 100 is really kind of the limit. And so why, do you have like 101 nodes in VeChain? Why do you have 100 in Libra? The reason is that's really the limit of today's technology. Does that mean it's going to stay at 100? No. I mean, does the internet, do we still get on with, 3G modems? And is that how we, communicate? It's a step in the cycle. So, in time, you'll be able to have so decentralized, even permission systems, that it will it's going to blur the line between permissioned and permissionless.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, permission systems, you might have some that are smaller. Maybe they have 500,000 nodes. But as long as there's no collusion between those, you get to a point where there's diminishing returns. There's a network that has 500 nodes. Is that a lot more trust? Is that less trustworthy than one that has 700 nodes? I don't really think it would make that much difference at that point in time. Obviously, it matters what kind of consensus they're using and things like this. But I think we really need to look carefully at the incentivization of these systems and really how decentralized is something that is claiming to be decentralized but really isn't.
So what are some of the questions consumer should ask? And what kind of questions should other businesses ask if they're working with an enterprise blockchain company?
I think, as with everything, when we talk about this in terms of what next and how do we go from here, I think that whether you're a consumer or as an individual entity or you're a corporate entity, business entity, you start with problems you want to solve, right? And we all have to start with saying, okay, these are things that are pain points, and I'm not happy with the status quo. And what you need to ask for in terms of application of blockchain or any technology for that matter is, how does this technology help me solve these problems in this way? So define the use case, define the problem you're going to solve, and really experimentation in these early days is really what it's about. I think that there are some great models and there's some great consortia that are already developing, that are providing the construct, the guidance to make it easier to onboard with the technology. But I think that, we are still in earlier days. And so this sense of experimentation is really important. I'll quote Marie Wieck, who's the general manager of IBM Blockchain, and in her interview, she mentioned it's kind of like exercise. You can't just read about it in a book and say, okay, I know something about exercise. You really have to go out there and be a practitioner. You have to go out and you have to test it. You have to figure out what works for you in the manner that's appropriate. You have to figure out the system that you're going to plug in with. You have to find partners that you will work with in helping something come to fruition. So you really have to go out and try some things with a certain thesis in mind and be flexible to say, something will be appropriate for the thesis or not, or change, whatever. You have to be somewhat flexible in that mindset. And I absolutely agree that where we're at is a pretty exciting time, because the experimentations and forays that have already been made in various sectors have already given us somewhat of a roadmap of the possibilities of what we can choose as individuals or as entities, as business entities. And so, but starting with that problem and the use case, I think is absolutely essential.
Yeah. And, what we do in the book is we list out what are the near-term use cases in every area. Some are going to impact a consumer and some won't. Some are really focused on streamlining back office processes for companies. And, they have big issues because everybody's got these centralized systems and everybody's got their own records, and nobody trusts anybody else.
But to that point, these are not small issues. They're like trillion-dollar issues.
Yeah, I mean, these are enormous. You're looking at companies saving hundreds of billions of dollars over a few-year period. So these are enormous issues that companies have been dealing with for, in some cases, centuries. And now they have the tools to use online systems to do massive amounts of increases in efficiency. And you're seeing that happen throughout, the financial industry. You're going to see it happen in healthcare. You're seeing
it's already happening in supply chain and logistics.
Yeah, supply chain and logistics. It's happening everywhere. You've got, where the consumer can get involved. We've talked about food. It can also come in drug safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's already happening.
There's been this whole opioid crisis. A lot of people were purchasing drugs off the internet.
Yeah.
65% of drugs that are gotten through the internet are typically counterfeit, and you get a lot of deaths. There's some pretty high-profile deaths from, people in the U.S., Prince and other people, who unfortunately got caught up in purchasing drugs online, and that's where the consumer really needs to know, is this drug that I'm getting, pharmaceutical drug, is it real? Right?
I think that, one of the great things about moving forward is that we are re-establishing and restoring this trust between entities, whether that's individual to individual or entity to individual or between entities. You really are talking about a restoration of trust. And being able to authenticate that trust is really important because we've really lived, I think, the furthest lengths of what Web 2.0 could offer, and the construct is really not capable of delivering the kind of trust that we need today. We can't distinguish what's real and what's not, and so this proliferation of fake everything is really something that is upon us, and we absolutely need to figure out a way beyond that. And so blockchain and related systems, so it's not just blockchain by itself, but in concert perhaps with even AI or IoT or other advanced technologies, is really where we're seeing exciting applications and implications.
Yeah. And so we see this as a transformative period. We call it Web 3.0. And Radhika talked about the Internet of Trust. There's the Internet of Value, which everybody in the crypto space is focused on.
Oh, yeah.
But the underlying that Internet of Value is Internet of Trust, because we trust in the blockchain.
Correct.
And then there's Internet of Identity. And that one really has tremendous potential to remake society in a much fairer way for everyone. And we see that these three different processes are going to roll out over the next 5 to 10 years, and it's going to be really exciting.
So I think we've given a bit of a tour of our book. I know we're running out of time with you, I think, Michelle. But, this book has really been a culmination of our journey and our thoughts and thesis in this space. And, bolstering that with some amazing conversations with industry leaders, and our hope is that people will enjoy this book and find it very useful and practical at the same time. We're really happy to announce that we hit bestseller status already. So that's a huge accomplishment, and we have amazing supporters like you, Michelle, that were part of our journey, and we really thank you for that too.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
I wanted to ask you, besides the book, about one wisdom that you could provide to the community around the world who is listening. Either the advice could be about entrepreneurship, your position as an investor, or as an author. What do you suggest, or what do you think that people should think about when they're thinking about blockchain or writing a book or about entrepreneurship?
Wow, that's pretty broad.
A lot of things.
There's a lot of things you could say on a lot of different fronts. I mean, I think ultimately it's an attitude. It's an ethos that we're talking about, and a mindset that we're talking about. And this mindset of community, to me, is incredibly foundational for where we're headed, not only in our business world or in our personal world, but at the planetary level. So I'll just say this, that I think that we're looking at systems like blockchain in combination with other advanced technologies where we're really redefining new constructs that take us to a better way that we can live on this planet. The whole concept of community and mindset, I think, is the foundational aspect to achieving a better society, a better planet for all species. It's not just mankind. We're at a juncture in our arc as a race on this planet, and we're facing all manner of constraints, many of which we've caused ourselves. So I think if we have to rectify and move more sustainably towards the future, we really have to think about a community mindset. And to me, that journey, whether it's as an entrepreneur or whether it's writing a book, this book particularly, or any other thing that I'm choosing to embark upon, it's really that sense of global community that I'd like to share as advice to people.
Yeah, and that's huge, Radhika, and I think those are incredibly important points. The only thing I would add is that this technology is at an early stage and it's not going away. It's going to be getting stronger and stronger, and there's going to be more and more built on it. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an author in technology, if you're looking at what's going to be happening over the next few years, blockchain needs to be a part of that. And like Radhika said, there's going to be a lot of things that are built on top of it with other technologies, but it's the source of truth. Without it, there is no truth online.
I'd say it's a secure source of truth.
It's a secure source of truth, and that's a foundation that is missing from the online world. There are, like we mentioned, a number of different components, but as part of this wave, it is that foundation piece, and so it will become part of the infrastructure that we all live with online. So again, if you're an entrepreneur, you're an author, interested in tech, etc., look at this space, understand it. It is the future.
And then also,
it's also the present.
Yeah, where can we find out and learn more about the book?
Great. Glad you asked. We have a book website. That's probably a great place to find out more about us and more about our book and more about the people that are involved in the book as well, our 27 business leaders. You can go to http://enterpriseblockchainhasarrived.com. And I know that's a mouthful, but it is the title of our book, so it's pretty easy to remember.
Or you can just go to Amazon and put in Enterprise Blockchain, and our book will come up in the number one position. Awesome. So enterpriseblockchainhasarrived.com or Enterprise Blockchain as a search term in Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you, Jorden and Radhika.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.